how useful the efforts you are all making here about producing this toolbox to really be an input into the process. Okay, so now we are going to have, as you can see, a very impressive panel here. So all these people, they are all here for you. And they're all here also for the over 1,000 people that normally watch us by a webcast. So hopefully we have a wider impact. The discussion openers we have here today are intended to provide information about what we already know, what is our common knowledge in the UN system and our partners in relation to the tools for implementation. So all these toolboxes that we have been talking about, all the tools you have, so what do we know? What is out there that is already, a lot of work has been done before this conference, of course. So the intentions of this discussion openers is to serve to highlight some of the issues that you will be discussing tomorrow, because you all here have a role tomorrow in the different parallel sessions. So that in a way, and that's what I encourage my speakers to do, it is your messages to them on what you want them to discuss, because these same people will take back what you have been saying the last day and will reflect back on how maybe they have changed their mind or not in relation to their initial presentations. So you may also want to use these presentations to propose some of the possible lessons learned that you also like to see, so that it gives an idea of how the discussions we will have tomorrow will have an impact on what we know. So we'll know more at the end of the day. You have 15 minutes each. I know you have time. And in a way, these presentations now, they are more conventional. Tomorrow it is more about debate and dialogue. This first day is more about conventional putting forward information to you. So you have to, I really apologize for that. As soon as we had a debate, you can see it before in the panel before, it was most interesting. But I think it's important to have information, that common information on the table. So tomorrow we don't go over and over again on what we already know, that we really have a dialogue. And after that, we are going to have a response panel from the thematic perspective. So we have 4 panelists on the tools and 4 panelists on the thematic perspective. So now we are going to start after I have explained what we are doing here. And I would like to ask Jose Hesti from UNICEF to talk about implementing the wars-related targets through capacity development and social instruments and the role of the different stakeholders.
That's a lot.
Just give us food for thought.
Yes, I will. Okay, buenas tardes a todos. Good afternoon. Thanks, Josefina. Thanks very much for inviting us in UNICEF to make this presentation. We believe that this shows that we seem to know about what we talk when we talk about water sanitation and hygiene. I will also ask you to excuse my voice. It's a little bit, I'm having a cold, so I'm having some problems with my voice. The way we have structured this presentation is first to talk a little bit about the implementation baseline for WAS, and we have already heard a couple of thoughts about this, but I will explain a little bit in more detail on where are we now with the implementation of the water sanitation MDGs, and where are we looking and how does this look as a baseline for the SDGs. We will also make the core of the presentation around what is already working, what we think in UNICEF and together with other partners in the sector think are already the tools that are making progress and helping us advance. And then I will make just one slide very quickly, if I have time, to spice a little bit the conversations tomorrow about the different roles of the different stakeholders. So we have already heard today that thanks to the joint monitoring program that, as you know, is led by UNICEF and WHO, and has provided us with a lot of information about numerical information on how are we doing with the progress of the implementation of the MDGs. We know that in 2010 the world globally achieved the water MDG, which is very good news. But we also know, and therefore I wanted to present you with this map, that sub-Saharan Africa is really facing the greatest challenge when it comes to provision of drinking water. Indeed, as you can see on the screen, there are a couple of countries where access to improved water sources is not even reaching 50% of the population. And although the water MDG was globally met, this shows the huge disparities in access. If we look at the same theme, but just paying attention to what is the progress that different countries are making towards the achievement of their national kind of MDG targets, we see that there are a lot of countries pictured in orange, meaning that they are not on track to meet the water target. If we look at the situation with the progress on sanitation, this is even much worse, because here is not just about problems in sub-Saharan Africa, but it's more worldwide. We can see that there are a lot of countries where access to improved sanitation is not reaching even 50% of the population. When it comes to the progress towards the achievement of the MDGs, it looks even worse, with a lot of countries colored in orange, meaning that they are not on track. And here, I'm very much working in UNICEF. Here we can see that global averages mask a lot of things, because if we look at the map in the middle, we see a couple of countries in red, showing that 50% of the population, they don't have access to drinking water sources. But if we take a look to what happened in urban areas, we see that the map looks much better. We don't see any red, we see a lot of blue, meaning that the access is much better. But if we take a look on the right, and we see the rural areas, we see that for the same countries, there are a lot of areas, rural areas, that are not really having even 50% of the population with access to improved water sanitation and hygiene. So basically, in this part of the presentation, we've been talking about access to water and sanitation, and we have already highlighted a couple of issues about inequalities. But as we have already heard during the first session, they're having already a lot of consultations and a lot of dialogues and a lot of reports already with our colleagues trying to identify what is the best thing, the best way forward for a new agenda, for an SDG agenda. And then I just wanted to highlight here a couple of issues that we see as main challenges for the WAS sector as we are going to jump into the implementation of the new development agenda beyond 2015. The first of them is the issue about financing, which has been already mentioned here. And then, as has been mentioned in the WHO and UN Water Report, 2015, the GLASS report, there is a huge need to secure, absorb, and target sustain international and national financing. There are good news, because we know that between 2012 and 2014, international commitments for water and sanitation have increased as much as by 30%. But this may not be enough if what we are going to achieve, or we want to achieve, is universal access.
Tracking back some of the history that relates to technology and it being a means of implementation more formally as of the Rio+20 conference, I'll share with you some of the developments of that discussion and what it will lead on to. And after that, I will be tracking some elements of the landscape that we identified within the background paper, both in terms of technology gaps and in terms of technology challenges or opportunities, whatever we want to call them. And leading out from that, I will somehow leave some homeworks, as the homeworks have been done so far by us in preparing the background paper. Now there's homeworks also for the discussions of the coming days, into trying and identify some replies to the questions that were coming out really loud and clear from the analysis of the documents that we carried out in preparation of this background document. As I was indicating to you, technology is clearly recognized in the Rio+20 outcome document as one of the key means of implementation, and this has brought to the development of a number of discussions at the level of General Assembly that were sparked by two complementary reports of the UN Secretary General. Full details are here and in the background document, and a series of 8 workshops and structured dialogue during the 67th and 68th session of General Assembly. As you have all seen, these discussions have been permeating as well in the report of the open-ended working group in terms of technology being reflected within Goal 17, that is specifically touching upon, again, making a very strong reference to technology and suggesting some proposals of way forward, on one of which there is already action, and I'll revert to that later on during the presentation. So what did we see when we started looking around and trying to set the context on where we are today? The graphics that are microscale but are a little bit bigger in the background paper will show you very clearly that if there's technology being developed, this is normally happening in the developed country, and that the flow of technology is still from developed country to developing country. There's also information on patents being registered. In parallel to that, this flow is still generating a very uneven distribution and a very uneven capacity to respond to technology. Sustainable solutions. How can we come up with solutions that are not only the small patch being placed in a problem, but that see the problem in a more holistic perspective? So we started to group out the numerous challenges to technology implementation that were coming up from the research. On purpose, you will see empty boxes. We do not have the expectations to have found all of them. So we are looking very much forward to the discussion of these 2 days to be able to fill any eventual gap that we have identified during this process. We also tried to make a distinction between those two challenges, the group of challenges that were emerging from the discussion. We tried to figure out whether some of those challenges were actually challenges associated with other means of implementation, and we actually found quite a few of them would be resonating to access to finance, access to sustained finance to maintain technological solution, as well as the existence of incentives that are not prone to stimulating the implementation of new cultural barriers, social awareness, and education of the community. Absorptive capacity, being those technological solutions part of a system which probably is not being designed to enable the implementation of this solution. And property rights associated to the technologies and the governance aspects associated with that. So let me quickly close the presentation by referring back to some of the homeworks that we would like to leave to the participants that will be discussing tomorrow in the session and the day after. As I was mentioning to you, the Secretary General report in some of the paragraph was calling specifically to some action that refers to technology, and more specifically another presentation preceded me, but I'm really happy to reinforce the fact of having a unique voice throughout the different processes. It's just tomorrow and the day after. But what will be important for us to reflect on while going through and analyzing those tools is to understand which are the challenges, and it's generally more than one that
pick up on that, on the question of economic instruments. And also thank you for making this institutional link, which is so important with this technology platform that we are being asked by the Secretary General to develop. So thank you very much. So now we have all this information on the table. He was the lead organization for the water resources management, together with the Global Water Partnership. I think Ursula is here as well. So please, the floor is yours. What do you think about this? You will do it from there. There's not going to be presentations for this response panel, so go ahead.
I will. Okay, it works. So thank you, Josefina. And I guess the difference between a presentation and a panelist is that the panelist speaks while he's sitting. So, Indeed, as you said, we were together with GWP helping in the preparation of this conference, looking at the theme on water resource management and water scarcity. And therefore, I've been listening to the presentations and preparing a little bit for this discussion, having this water scarcity and water resource management focus in mind. I guess this is the rule of and reaching their targets. And I can tell you, this is going to be really a change for us, because when country will have accepted to commit to agreed targets, it will be much easier for us working in that field to engage with all different stakeholders and partners and discuss these questions that so far have not had international goals or targets. I would like to on agriculture side, etc. But what about consumption? What is the role and the responsibility of those who consume the products that we produce? To the academia, I think there is a major issue still to be addressed, is bridging the knowledge gap between research and policy. And I've seen that in one presentation, and I think this is really a very interesting subject to discuss. And finally, to governments, we can discuss at length good governance, efficient governance, better governance, improved governance. I think the whole issue of the political difficulty of managing scarcity is very well known to us. It is an extremely difficult issue, but it has to be addressed. How do we manage scarcity? In the past, we would give more water to more people. Now we have to divide less water among even more people. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you. So you can see there is a lot of homework for you and a lot of issues on the table. And thank you very much, Jean-Marc, because you have really played the role of trying to bring the thematic issues into the discussion. So now we are going to have you're going to Nathalie, André, and Didier Allais from WHO. I'm not sure what you're going to talk, both of you, or you're going to...
I think I'll start. And
I know you don't have it easy, because we already had a presentation from Jose on that. So
yes, we have discussed, so there is no overlap.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah. So like Jean-Marc, I'm thankful to be seated because I'm wearing some...
The rights, let's put an S now, to water and sanitation. I think it's going to be very, very important to go into details in looking at the disparities, to look at the questions of inequities or equities, and the different groups that we're covering. I'll stop here.
Thank you very much. And thank you for bringing the issue of monitoring. We try to avoid a little bit the monitoring issue in this conference, because I think in itself it will require a whole conference. But I think, anyway, thank you, because it is related, and we put it in the issues of governance as well as you did. Okay, so now, John Hardin. So you're going to tell us about how all this makes sense for risks.
Thank you, Josefina. Thank you for the well-organized meeting too, and a friendly welcome. As you can imagine, since I work in the UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, UNISDR, I was very happy to see that the issue of disaster risk management was the main thread throughout this event, the end of decade event. It's never very... When I left last night at 2 o'clock, they were converging for the first time on 7 global targets on disaster risk management. And this is will be the first time we actually have such targets in the national...
in the next few days. That's what I'll do. Now, the first one is that we face here, that we need to deal with regards to implementation of the target within of this theme. The fact that we know too little about the water quality, about what is the state of water quality, first and foremost, but even less about what is its impact on the aquatic ecosystems. We know far too little. And that's, of course, a very challenging position to start off implementing something. It's very difficult to implement something that you don't quite understand to what extent, what are the trends, and how fast you are reversing that. So that's going to be one of the big implementation challenges, that we need to know more about it as soon as possible, within a context that we have very little data, and both in terms of spatially, but also in terms of content parameters, and also we have and its linkages to other sectors, but also within the background of governments not willing to share that data. That's a big challenge that we need to deal with, and also with governments not sharing, with very little opportunities of exchanging information on effective policies, approaches, and so on. That's the background we have here. And with stakeholders not having been sensitized to a level that they play an important role in addressing the water quality challenge. That deals with what are the related issues that we'll be able to defend the SDG as it is. And indeed, I think it's very important for water quality. That's what I expect, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Thomas, we have to monitor means of implementation as well. Is that what I heard from you?
We have to discuss that.
Okay. Great. I'm tempted to give my tool coordinators the word, but I'm not going to do it because it's a little bit late. The purpose, and I'm not going to give you the floor either, because the purpose of this presentation was really to set the scene, and everything you want to know, everything you want to discuss, it will be done tomorrow. Tomorrow is your day, and it's the time that you're going to discuss and deal with all the issues that have been presented here. And it's late, and it's coffee break, and I know I put off the coffee break for a long time, so just have your coffee and come back in half an hour. Thank you very much. And a big round of applause to our speakers.